When my aunt passed away, she left me her old mountain cabin, something my parents never expected. But when they tried to take it from me, they had no idea what that place held or what I'd become because of it. Aunt Marjorie's funeral felt colder than the October air around us. People came and went, whispering things about how strange she had been. My parents stood stiff near the front, not out of grief but out of duty. My mom, Evelyn, kept glancing at the will in the lawyer's hands like it was some kind of insult waiting to happen. My dad, Greg, only sighed and muttered about how much money that property must be worth. When the lawyer announced that Marjorie had left her cabin to me, the silence in the room felt like it cracked the air. My mom's face went pale. "There must be a mistake," she said, her voice sharp. "Why would she give it to Riley?" The lawyer explained that the will was clear. Everything went to me. No loopholes, no shared inheritance. Just mine. My parents didn't speak to me the rest of the day. On the drive home, I heard my mom whispering to my dad about handling things legally. I didn't say a word. Marjorie had always been kind to me, even when my parents called her a loner with bad ideas. When I was little, she used to send me postcards from that cabin, handwritten notes about snow, deer, and quiet mornings by the fire. I hadn't seen her much in recent years, but I never forgot how she made me feel safe. A week later, I decided to visit the cabin. It sat deep in the Vermont woods, past a gravel road that curved forever through pines and fog. When I pulled up, the place looked exactly like the pictures I remembered, weathered wood, green shutters, and smoke stains above the chimney. It felt peaceful and heavy at the same time, like it was holding its breath. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and dust. There were shelves full of books, old blankets, and pictures of Marjorie smiling at people I didn't recognize. On the desk by the window sat a neat stack of journals tied with string. The top one had my name on a note. For Riley. I sat down and opened it. Her handwriting was shaky but careful. The first page simply said, "If you're reading this, then the cabin is yours. Take care of it, and it will take care of you." I didn't know what she meant, but something about those words made my chest tighten. Outside, the trees creaked in the wind. The whole place seemed alive, as if it was waiting for something, or someone. When I turned off the light that night, I caught my reflection in the old mirror by the door. For a second, I thought I saw Marjorie standing behind me, smiling faintly. I blinked, and she was gone. The cabin went quiet again, but I could still feel her there, watching. The next week, I met with the lawyer again to finish some papers. His name was Mr. Dalton, an older man with kind eyes and a slow way of speaking. He went over every detail carefully, making sure I understood what Aunt Marjorie had done. The cabin, the land, and everything inside it belonged only to me. No one else had a claim. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "Your aunt was very clear about this, Riley. She wanted it in writing that your parents, Evelyn and Greg, are never to have access to the property." I frowned. "Never? Why would she say that?" Mr. Dalton hesitated. "She didn't explain. But she was serious. She made me promise to tell you one thing. Never let them step foot inside the cabin." Her words exactly. It sounded like something Marjorie would say. She always had her odd beliefs, her rules that made no sense to anyone else. I forced a small laugh and told him I'd keep that in mind, but part of me felt uneasy. It wasn't like she ever hated my parents, just didn't trust them. Maybe she thought they'd ruin the place or sell it off. When I got back to the cabin, the light was soft through the trees, and it felt good to be alone again. I started opening drawers and cabinets, trying to learn more about the woman who'd left all this behind. There were family photos, some with faces I didn't recognize, and old trinkets, a snow globe, postcards, faded recipes. Then I found it, a plain white envelope sitting on top of a pile of books. My name was written across it in her familiar handwriting, Riley. The paper was yellowed at the edges like it had been waiting a long time. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it carefully. The letter inside was short. The first line made me stop breathing. "If they come for this place, don't let them in. You'll understand why." I read it again, slower this time, hoping it would make more sense. But it didn't. There was no explanation, no story, no reason. Just that one line, written in her steady hand. I looked around the cabin, suddenly aware of every sound. The creak of the floorboards, the faint ticking of an old clock, the rustle of the trees outside. It felt like the walls were holding a secret I couldn't see. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, setting it on the table. For a moment, I thought about calling my mom, asking if she knew anything about this. But then I remembered her angry voice at the funeral, how she'd talked about lawyers and mistakes. I decided against it. Instead, I walked through each room slowly, touching the old wood, the worn furniture, the cold windows. I didn't know what Aunt Marjorie meant, but one thing was clear. This place wasn't just a house. It was something else, and she wanted to make sure I kept it safe. That night, I decided to sleep in the cabin for the first time. I lit a few candles because the old lamps flickered, and the power kept cutting out every few minutes. The wind outside was strong, and the trees groaned against it. I tried to tell myself it was just the woods settling, just normal sounds, but the cabin felt different after dark. Around midnight, I heard what sounded like slow footsteps above me. I froze. The cabin only had one floor, but there was a crawl space in the attic I hadn't checked yet. The steps were light, almost careful, moving back and forth. Then they stopped. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing. I finally convinced myself it must have been the wind and tried to go back to sleep. Just as I was drifting off, a soft humming came from the corner near the fireplace. It was a woman's voice, low, calm, almost like a lullaby. My eyes flew open. The fireplace suddenly flickered to life, even though I hadn't lit it. The flames burned steady and bright. My chest tightened, and for a long moment I couldn't move. After a while, the humming faded, and the fire slowly dimmed on its own. I sat up, grabbed one of Marjorie's journals from the desk, and started reading by candlelight just to distract myself. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, mostly notes about the seasons, animals she'd seen, or small daily thoughts. But then I came across a page that made me stop. She had written, "The family debt is old. The cabin keeps balance when the bloodline forgets." I read it again, not understanding. Family debt? Balance. It didn't sound like her usual ramblings. There were more strange lines, things like, "The house knows who belongs, and greed unsettles what was made right." The words sent a chill down my spine. Just as I was thinking about closing the book, my phone started to ring. It was my mom. Then my dad. Then both again. Call after call. I finally picked up, and my mom's voice came through, too sweet, too cheerful. "Riley, honey, we were just talking about you. How's the cabin? Isn't it lovely up there?" Her tone was too light. My dad chimed in from the background, pretending to sound casual. "Yeah, must be nice to have your own place now. We should come visit soon, see what your aunt left behind." I felt my stomach twist. They never talked like this unless they wanted something. I kept my voice calm. "It's peaceful," I said. "I'm still unpacking." "That's great, sweetheart," my mom replied quickly. "We'll plan a trip up this weekend. Maybe help you settle in." I didn't answer for a moment. I could almost hear her smile through the phone, practiced and fake. "Sure," I finally said, lying through my teeth. "We'll talk about it later." When I hung up, the cabin was silent again. But as I looked toward the fireplace, a single ember still glowed faintly, like it was watching me. 2 days later, I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. When I looked out the window, my parents' car was parked in front of the cabin. They hadn't called or warned me. I stood there for a second, unsure whether to open the door or pretend I wasn't home. But before I could decide, my mom was already walking up the porch steps with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Riley," she said too brightly, "we couldn't wait to see the place. Your aunt and I spent so many good times here." That was a lie. I knew they barely spoke for years, and when they did, it usually ended in shouting. My dad followed behind her, his hands shoved in his coat pockets, looking around with quiet calculation. "Nice spot," he said, glancing at the trees. "Bet this land's worth a lot these days." I stepped aside to let them in, mostly because I didn't want to argue on the porch. My mom's eyes darted around the living room like she was inspecting everything. "Oh, she still has that old clock," she said, running her hand along a dusty shelf. "Brings back memories." Her voice cracked just enough to sound like she was trying to cry, but her face stayed dry. My dad didn't bother pretending. He started wandering from room to room, opening cabinets, tapping on walls, muttering under his breath. "Cabin's in good shape for how old it is," he said. "You should probably get an appraisal." I wanted to ask him why, but I already knew the answer. I followed him to the back hallway and saw him staring at the locked basement door. He turned the knob once, twice, then looked over his shoulder. "What's down there?" he asked. "I don't know," I said quickly. "It's locked. Probably just storage." He smiled a little, the kind of smile that never meant anything good. "Storage can hold a lot of value." The rest of the evening dragged on. My mom kept pretending to reminisce, talking about her dear sister, while my dad stayed quiet, studying every corner. When it started to get dark, I made them tea and tried to be polite, though my stomach was in knots. After midnight, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint noises, soft creaks like someone moving around. I got up and walked down the hall, heart pounding. The sound was coming from the basement door. I turned the corner and froze. My dad was crouched by the door, trying to pick the lock with a small metal tool. "Dad!" I shouted. He jumped up, his face hard. "Don't sneak up on me like that. I was just checking if it was safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. Before he could answer, my mom appeared behind me, her face tight with anger. "You see," she snapped. "This is what happens when you put property before family. You've turned against us for money." Her words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, too stunned to speak. The house seemed to grow colder, the air heavy and still. Neither of them noticed, but I did, the sound of faint humming rising again, somewhere deep below the floor. The morning after my parents left, the cabin felt different. The air was still, like it was holding something in. I couldn't stop thinking about the basement door and the way my dad had tried to open it. Whatever was down there, my aunt had kept it locked for a reason. But now I needed to know why. I searched the drawers until I found a small brass key tied with a string and a tag that said "Root Cellar." My hands trembled as I held it. I walked down the hallway, stopped in front of the basement door, and pushed the key into the lock. It turned easily, as if it had been waiting for me. The door creaked open and a cool, earthy smell drifted up. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight as I slowly made my way down. There was only one small bulb hanging from the ceiling, and when I pulled the chain, it flickered weakly to life. The basement was nothing like I expected. It wasn't dusty or cluttered. Everything was organized. Shelves lined with glass jars filled with dried herbs, old bottles with faded labels, and stacks of books so old their spines had cracked. There were markings painted on the floor in dark red, circular symbols I couldn't understand. I walked around, touching things carefully. Some jars had names written on them, plants I didn't recognize, maybe medicinal herbs. But others had no labels at all, just cloudy liquid inside. I found an old wooden box on the table. Inside it were letters, most unfinished, written in my aunt's hand. The last one caught my eye. It wasn't in an envelope, just folded once. I opened it and read the first line. "The house remembers what was taken. Blood restores blood." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I read it again, trying to make sense of it. What was taken? What did she mean by blood restoring blood? I looked around the room again, and suddenly everything felt heavier. The air, the silence, even the light. On one of the shelves, I found another journal that looked newer than the others. I flipped through it, and there it was, my mother's name. Marjorie had written about Evelyn. About how, years ago, when their parents died, there was an inheritance meant for both of them. But Evelyn had stolen it, leaving Marjorie with nothing. She'd trusted her sister, and her sister had betrayed her. In the next entry, Marjorie wrote about how she came to this cabin with nothing but anger and grief. She mentioned learning old ways, words passed down from their grandmother. She said she'd tied the cabin to the family bloodline so that it would always find balance again, so that what was taken could be returned. I sat on the bottom step, holding the journal, my chest tight. I didn't know what kind of balance she meant, or what she had done, but I could feel it in the air. The cabin wasn't just a house. It was alive in its own quiet way, and it remembered everything that had ever happened within it. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had read in the basement. The words, the symbols, the strange feeling that the house somehow listened. I told myself I was imagining things, but every night the walls creaked like whispers, and the air carried a hum that felt almost alive. I wanted peace. I wanted my old life back. So I made a decision. I would sell the cabin. Let someone else deal with its secrets. The money could help me start fresh somewhere far away. I pulled out Aunt Marjorie's journals one more time, hoping for guidance or maybe a goodbye from her words. Near the back of one, I found a short note written in her shaky handwriting. "If greed enters, the house decides." I didn't know what it meant, but I didn't like the way it made me feel. I closed the book and shoved it into a drawer. Maybe it was just something she wrote when she was sick. A week later, I got a letter from a lawyer in town. My parents had filed a claim, saying I must have influenced Aunt Marjorie to change her will. They were accusing me of taking advantage of her. My hands shook as I read the papers. They were actually trying to take it from me, even after everything. 2 days later, they showed up again. This time, they weren't alone. A tall man in a suit stepped out of the car behind them, carrying a clipboard. "This is Mr. Halpern," my dad said proudly. "He's a realtor. Just here to take a look around." I stood on the porch, blocking the door. "You can't come in," I said. My mom smiled, pretending to be calm. "Sweetheart, please. We just want to see it one last time. This place is part of our family too." Her voice sounded soft, but her eyes were sharp. Behind her, the realtor waited awkwardly, glancing between us. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. I felt it like a breath against my neck. The fire that had been burning quietly in the hearth flickered low, almost out. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something metallic. My mom walked around, pretending to admire the furniture. My dad trailed behind her, whispering to the realtor about land value and potential buyers. I noticed frost forming at the corners of the windows, even though it wasn't cold outside. The realtor rubbed his arms, confused. "Is there a draft in here?" he asked. I didn't answer. I could feel the cabin reacting. The wood beneath my feet vibrated slightly, like it was breathing. My parents didn't seem to notice, or maybe they didn't care. My mom turned to me, her smile gone now. "You're not keeping this place, Riley," she said. "You don't deserve it." Before I could speak, the lights flickered once, then went out completely. The house went silent, heavy, waiting. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as I realized Aunt Marjorie's warning wasn't just words. The house really did decide. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, like the walls were holding their breath. The realtor tried to hide his discomfort, but I saw his eyes darting toward the windows as if he wanted to be anywhere else. My mom kept talking, pretending everything was normal, while my dad leaned over the old desk where Aunt Marjorie's papers were spread out. "Look at this," he said, picking up the original deed. "This place could be worth 3 times what we thought." The moment his hand touched the paper, he jerked it back and cursed. A red mark spread across his palm as if he'd touched a hot stove. "What the hell?" he muttered, shaking his hand. "That thing burned me." The realtor frowned, clearly nervous. Maybe it was static electricity? I knew it wasn't. The house felt alive around us. The floorboards groaned, the lights flickered, and the fire in the hearth flared for a moment before dying down again. My mom stepped toward the old mirror hanging on the wall. It had been there since the day I arrived, tall and cracked slightly at the edge. She looked into it and froze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Riley, what is this?" I looked over and felt my stomach twist. Her reflection didn't match her movements. In the mirror, her face seemed older, worn, twisted by something she couldn't hide. The reflection moved half a second too slow, its mouth curling into a sneer, even though she wasn't smiling. My mom stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The realtor gasped. I think I should go," he said, already heading toward the door. "Wait," my dad barked, but the man didn't stop. He yanked the door open and ran outside without looking back. The wind blew in behind him, slamming the door shut with a loud thud. The room went still. My parents looked at me like it was my fault, like I had planned all of it. My mom's voice rose, shaking with fear and anger. "What did you do, Riley? What did you bring into this house?" "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice trembling. "You wanted to come here." She pointed at the mirror, her hand shaking. "Undo it. Whatever you did, undo it." I looked around the cabin. The lights flickered again, and for a second, I thought I heard a whisper near the fireplace. It wasn't angry, it sounded calm, like a reminder. That's when I understood. Aunt Marjorie hadn't cursed this place. She'd tied it to something deeper. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. I remembered her words from the journal. If greed enters, the house decides. The truth hit me hard. The cabin wasn't punishing at random. It was reacting to them. Their greed, their lies, their constant taking. Every selfish thought in this house was being reflected back at them. My dad was pacing now, clutching his burned hand. My mom was breathing fast, staring at her reflection like she didn't recognize herself. The fire crackled once, loud and sharp, like the house itself was speaking. My parents looked terrified. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air shimmered faintly, and for a moment, I felt my aunt's presence, quiet but strong. This wasn't a curse. It was justice, and the house was only doing what it was meant to do. The storm started not long after the realtor ran away. Thunder rolled over the mountains, and rain slammed against the windows. My parents refused to leave. My mom paced the living room, muttering about finding the deed and fixing this mess. My dad started going through drawers, pulling out papers and tossing them onto the floor. "You're not taking this from us," my mom said, her voice sharp and shaking. "We built this family. You owe us. You need to leave," I told them, standing by the fireplace. The air in the cabin felt thick, humming softly, like it was listening. "You don't understand what this place does." My dad laughed, a bitter sound. "Don't start with that nonsense. This is just a house." He ripped open one of Aunt Marjorie's boxes, scattering her papers everywhere. My mom grabbed a folder from his hands and threw it into the fire. The flames rose suddenly, too high, too bright, lighting up the whole room. Outside, the wind howled. The roof rattled. Lightning flashed through the windows, and for a second, the whole cabin glowed white. The lights flickered, then dimmed to almost nothing. The storm sounded closer now, like it was circling the house. I bent down and grabbed the last journal Marjorie had written. I didn't know what else to do. My hands shook as I opened it, and near the end, I found her final words. "It will know your truth." I read it out loud without meaning to. The sound of my voice seemed to wake the whole house. The floor groaned under our feet, deep and low, like something alive was moving beneath the wood. My parents froze. "What's happening?" my mom whispered. The lights flickered again, and shadows crawled up the walls. The floorboards started to shift, bending slightly, groaning louder with each second. Then came the voices, faint at first, like whispers from the walls. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I saw my parents' faces change. My mom's eyes went wide, full of fear, as if she could see something I couldn't. "No," she said, backing away. "That's not real. That's not." She stopped, staring at something in front of her. I saw it too then, shapes forming in the air, almost like memories coming to life. I saw her younger self, sitting beside Aunt Marjorie at a kitchen table, signing papers. Then I saw her slipping money into her bag when her sister wasn't looking. The image shimmered, then faded, leaving her gasping. My dad stumbled backward, clutching his chest. Another vision appeared, him standing behind my mom, telling her to hide what she'd done, to let Marjorie struggle alone. He watched it play out, his face pale. "Stop it!" I shouted. "Please stop!" But the cabin didn't stop. The walls shuddered. The fire roared again, spilling orange light over their faces. My parents screamed as the floor split beneath them, just a thin crack that glowed faintly red. Wind howled through the open gaps, carrying a sound that almost felt like words. Then everything went silent. The light faded. The crack in the floor was gone. So were they. I stood there shaking, the journal still open in my hands. The storm outside began to calm. The cabin went still, like nothing had ever happened. Only the faint echo of my aunt's words remained in my head. "It will know your truth." Morning light crept through the cracks in the shutters, waking me from a restless sleep. For a few seconds, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The storm, the noise, the light, my parents' screams. I sat up quickly, my heart pounding. The cabin was completely still. No wind, no sound, just quiet air that felt almost soft against my skin. I called out for my mom, then my dad. Nothing. Their voices didn't answer, and their things were gone. The papers, the mess on the floor, everything had been cleared, like the house had reset itself overnight. Only the faint smell of wood smoke lingered. I walked through every room, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the silence. The place felt lighter now, like it had finally exhaled. The air didn't press on me the way it had before. For the first time since I arrived, the cabin felt like a home instead of a warning. I stopped in front of the fireplace, staring at the ashes that had gone cold. It was hard to believe what I'd seen, what had happened. A part of me wanted to think it was all a nightmare. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I whispered my aunt's name, not expecting an answer. Still, something in the air seemed to shift, like she was listening. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her, steady, calm, present. The same comforting warmth I remembered from when I was little, sitting beside her by a fire just like this one. I went upstairs, drawn by a feeling I couldn't explain. The attic door was half open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. Dust floated in the sunlight like tiny sparks. I climbed up slowly, the wood creaking under my feet. The attic was small, filled with old trunks and boxes covered in sheets. In the center sat a small wooden chest, clean and untouched by dust. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I opened it with shaking hands and read the message written in my aunt's familiar handwriting. "You've restored balance, my girl. This home is yours now, and it will protect you, if you never use it for greed." Tears welled up in my eyes. I pressed the note against my chest, feeling the weight of everything. The loss, the fear, the strange peace settling in my heart. She had known this would happen. Maybe she hadn't wanted revenge. Maybe she just wanted the truth to settle where it belonged. I stayed up there for a long time, staring out the small round window. The sun was rising over the trees, golden light spilling across the forest. I didn't hear any humming this time, but I felt something close, a quiet comfort wrapping around me like a promise. When I finally went back downstairs, I made tea and sat by the window. The silence didn't scare me anymore. The cabin was mine now, not because I inherited it, but because it had chosen to keep me. And I decided I would stay. Weeks passed quietly after that morning. The days began to feel calm and steady, each one starting with the sound of birds outside and the smell of pine drifting through the windows. I spent my time cleaning the cabin, fixing small things that had been left untouched for years. It felt good to take care of it, to make it feel alive again. The garden behind the house had been wild and overgrown, but I worked on it a little each day. I pulled weeds, trimmed branches, and planted herbs the way Aunt Marjorie used to. Sometimes, when I stood there with my hands in the soil, I felt like she was beside me, showing me how to do it right. The place no longer felt haunted or strange. It just felt like home. A few neighbors from town stopped by now and then. They had heard about the cabin and about me being Marjorie's niece. Most of them remembered her as that quiet woman who kept to herself. They were kind, curious, and polite. One older man, Mr. Cole, leaned on his truck one afternoon and asked, "You planning to sell this place? You could make a good bit of money for land like this." I smiled and shook my head. "No, I'm keeping it in the family." He nodded slowly, like he understood, and didn't ask again. After he drove off, I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the trees sway. The cabin sat still behind me, warm and peaceful. I knew I could never sell it, not because of what had happened, but because it felt like a part of me now. In the evenings, I read Aunt Marjorie's books by the fire. Some were about gardening, others were old journals or notebooks filled with her thoughts. Her words were gentle, thoughtful, never angry. She wrote about balance, kindness, and the way a home could remember the people who loved it. Every sentence made me feel closer to her. One night, I sat by the fire with the window slightly open. The air outside was cool, and the stars were bright above the trees. Everything was quiet, peaceful. Then I heard it, a soft humming, faint and familiar. The same tune I had heard on my very first night here. This time I didn't feel afraid. I closed my eyes and smiled. "Thank you, Aunt Marjorie," I whispered. The sound faded slowly, as if carried away by the wind. The fire burned low, casting a warm glow over the room. I sat there for a while, listening to the quiet. The cabin seemed to settle around me, creaking gently like it was breathing again. I felt safe, grounded, and calm. Whatever had happened here was over now. The house was at peace, and so was I. Outside, the forest moved softly in the breeze. The cabin waited, silent and still, watching over me like it always had.